We're so pleased to be joined here on the Top Line set by Ryan Frazier, a Republican candidate for the House seat in Colorado, running in the 7th Congressional District out in Colorado. Thank you for being here.
It's good to be here with you today.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I want to start just with we're seeing with the National Republicans this week rolling out an agenda, their version for the contract with America. I know this is coming from the Hill folks, but is this relevant for your campaign?
Well, I think the relevancy of it is really more of a perception in terms of the American people clearly want from Republicans a party that is focused on solutions, that will bring forth ideas as to how we get our economy on track, how we be more fiscal responsible to the people that we represent. And so from that perspective, I think it's relevant. But from my personal perspective on the ground in the 7th Congressional District of Colorado, it really comes down to the type of campaign that I run, talking about the issues that the folks in Colorado care about, which aren't unlike the people all around America care about, but in a way in which makes sense in Colorado.
So you won't see yourself running on whatever the House Republicans put out on Thursday. I mean, that's not going to be your campaign platform.
No,
so you might agree with parts,
right.
Disagree, but
I'm sure that as the old 80-20 rule will apply. 80% of the time we agree, the other 20% perhaps we don't. But I'm going to run on a campaign that is important to the people of the 7th Congressional District of Colorado, and it's going to be jobs. It's going to be fiscal responsibility. It's going to be providing them a Congress that is accountable to the people they represent.
Now you're up with your first ad. I want to play a little bit of it and then ask you a question about it.
Record deficits, nationalized health care, violence at our borders, out of control spending, corrupt politicians. And that's just the first 2 years of change.
All right, you're kind of floating around there, but that's kind of, what was the Jedi?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, this is obviously you're talking in kind of broad brushstrokes, criticizing the current regime in Washington. But when are you going to go hard negative up against your opponent, Congressman Perlmutter? I mean, do you see that happening? Is this race going to get tough?
Well, I think it is. We have to draw some contrast between the current incumbent representative and myself. People need to know why I'm different and what I offer that he doesn't. He happens to vote 98% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. I believe this district deserves an independent mind, someone who will represent the district and who won't just go along with the party to get along, but will do what is right with respect to the people they represent. And so I'm fighting to offer that alternative, that choice. And at some point in the campaign, I'm sure in the next few weeks, people will start to see a very clear contrast between their current incumbent representative and a new way forward.
Sounds like you may help them get to that contrast. I want to ask you, because you were running for Senate before you decided to run for the House seats. You were a Senate candidate for a while. That Senate campaign in Colorado ended up being fascinating on the primary side. Ken Buck winning with a lot of Tea Party energy. Add to that the governor's race, where Dan Mays has been running and has been cut off from a lot of the establishment from some of the things he said. Are you concerned about all the Tea Party energy and some of the controversial things you see from the Christine O'Donnells of the world? Is that going to end up tarring Republicans who have nothing to do with them, like yourself?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about that because, many of the folks in the Tea Party movement, these are just regular folks who've decided that, they're really fundamentally concerned about the direction of the country and they want their voices heard. Remember, T stands for taxed enough already. So these are people who feel like the federal government has just overreached and is overburdening themselves and their families. And they're doing something about it. And I think that's a good part of what makes America great. We as individuals can step up, make our voices heard, and try to move our country in a better direction.
Now, as you know, Ken Buck has been hammered by Democrats in Colorado and nationally as an extremist. Right. Portraying him as one of these Tea Party extremists. I'm wondering if you feel comfortable with some of the things he said. I mean, for instance, on our show here, he said that liberal progressivism is more of a threat to the United States than Al-Qaeda. I mean, are you comfortable with Ken Buck as the Senate nominee out there?
Well, Ken's a guy who's worked hard to earn the nomination of the Republican Party, and I think Ken has a good shot of actually winning the Senate contest. I think what's more important is that what is my message as a candidate for Congress, and that's where we're talking about the economy, we're talking about fiscal responsibility, and living within our means.
But if I may, but are you uncomfortable? And it's not just Ken Buck, and we have this. Call it the Tea Party movement, call it whatever you want, but we have candidates that have won: Sharon Angle in Nevada, Ken Buck, O'Donnell in Delaware, with some positions that in previous cycles would have been simply disqualifying. Very strong positions on government spending, even suggesting changes to Social Security and Medicare. Are you concerned with the direction that the party seems to be headed with some of these candidates?
No, I'm not. I mean, because I think in any party you have different candidates, and in some cases you're going to have those who are more to to the extreme than others. And I don't think necessarily that Ken Buck represents that. I know him. He's a very even killed guy, and so sure, everybody from time to time says something that can be taken out of context. But really, I think what you're seeing more than anything in these candidates is a message of people who are fundamentally concerned about the direction of the country. They want more accountability from their government, and they want folks who will actually listen to them. And I think that's what you're seeing with respect to all these upstarts in these races across the country.
Well, give us a portrait of what it means to have Republican control. What does a Speaker Boehner do? What's the first item on the agenda, do you think? What should be the first item on the agenda on Republican control of Congress?
Well, I think it has to be a pro-economic growth agenda. It has to be jobs. I mean,
so what do you do? What gets done to get
well,
to
I think first
jobs?
And foremost, you have to give businesses an environment of certainty. Right now, there's a paralysis of confidence. People are scared to invest, which means we're not creating jobs, real sustainable jobs. So we need an environment that gives businesses the confidence to invest.
So what does Congress do to do that?
So let me tell you, what we do is we extend the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts for all Americans to incentivize investment and get jobs created.
Extended permanently or temporarily?
Well, at least, I think what we can find some compromise is at least temporarily. That's something we should all be able to find some level of agreement around. But we need that to give confidence to our investors and to our entrepreneurs. That's one. Two, we also need to make sure we have the types of policies that incentivize extending credit to small businesses and allowing small businesses to deduct some of their income so they can use those monies to invest and create jobs as well. Thirdly, in Colorado and perhaps other parts of the country, we need to embrace an all-of-the-above energy policy that says there's no reason we can't do it all. Renewables, natural gas, as well as the other means of production we have around the country. These are high-paying, good jobs that help power our economy, and a growing economy requires cheap energy.
Should those tax cuts be paid for? Should they be offset by cuts elsewhere? Because otherwise it adds to the deficit.
Well, that's one rule of thumb. I mean, if you look at tax cuts throughout the Kennedy administration, the Reagan administration, when those tax rate cuts were put into effect, you actually saw an increase in government revenues.
I know the argument about trying to grow government, but if you extend those tax cuts, you are adding to the deficit. Yeah. There's no way around.
Well, I think what you can do, what we need to do, is this is the other part of what has to be a part of our agenda, which is grow the economy and control spending. And if we work towards a balanced budget, which Congress has been unwilling or unable to do for too long now, I think we can pay for any tax rate reductions that we put in place. I mean, balancing the budget is something we as families, as individuals, have to do every day. We have to figure out how to live within our means.
You willing to see some tax hikes to balance the budget long term?
I don't think tax hikes are the answer.
You say absolutely not?
Yeah, I don't think they're part of the answer. I think that would do more to hurt economic growth and hurt investment and job creation if you talk about tax increases. That cannot be the answer right now. We can have that conversation between Republicans, Democrats about additional revenue sources down the road, but right now we need confidence, and that's brought about by tax relief.
Let me just ask you about something else. So if you get elected to the Congress, are you going to join the Congressional Black Caucus?
I'll certainly entertain it, and I'm more than willing to have that conversation with the Congressional Black Caucus, but who knows? It all depends on whether I think I can have an effective voice in making that caucus better.
Why do you think it's been so long since we've had even one African-American Republican in Congress?
Well, I think it speaks largely to the fact that Republicans have not done enough to engage in the Black community and Hispanic communities on the issues that they care about. And I think one thing I've tried to do in my campaign is to reach out to everybody. And I'm not afraid to show up to an NAACP meeting or Hispanics contractor meeting to talk about issues and to half the battle is just showing up. And that's one thing we as Republicans need to do a better job of.
So how do they do that?
Show up, engage. We know where to find folks. It's like knocking on someone's door. Someone will say, well, I voted for the other guy before, but because you knocked on my door, you got my support this time. We got to do the same type of engagement. Show up. Talk about the issues. Talk about how you create jobs. Right now, unemployment amongst blacks is at 16%. Amongst Hispanics, 12%. Let's talk about how we get folks back to work.
Ryan Frazier, candidate for House out in Colorado. We appreciate you spending some time with us here on Top Line.
It's great to be here.
So much.
Thanks for joining us.
That does it for this edition of Top Line. For the very senior John Carl, I'm Rick Klein. When Twitter's back, it's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/John Carl.
Yeah.
John Carl, don't forget.
That one should be first.
Can you spell it?